Welcome to Service Titans, the podcast where we dive deep into the inspiring journeys of Black men within the AmeriCorps community. From serving in classrooms to rebuilding neighborhoods, these are the stories of passion, purpose, and resilience. Join us as we amplify the voices of members of the AmeriCorps community and share their triumphs, challenges, and the impact they've made in their communities. Whether you're a seasoned AmeriCorps veteran or someone considering service, this is the space to explore, reflect, and be inspired. Get ready to be uplifted, empowered, and connected. This is Service Titans.
The views and opinions shared on this podcast are those of the individuals speaking and do not reflect the views of their employers, organizations, or any groups they may be affiliated with. We are here to have real, honest conversations, and that means everything shared is coming from personal perspectives, not on behalf of any company or institution. Some episodes may include discussions around sensitive topics that could be triggering or emotionally intense for some listeners. Please take care of yourself and pause if you need to.
What up, though? Welcome to Service Titans, the show where we dive into the stories, experiences, and insights of remarkable individuals making a difference in their communities and beyond. I'm your host, Anton Taylor, and today's guest is Emmanuel Paul Sterling. Emmanuel's a Louisiana native and NYC transplant who built his career at the crossroads of mission-driven organizations, equity, and people. Welcome to the podcast, Emmanuel. I want to start by just getting to know you, and I think for all of us, there's a person behind the story, and I want to start with, what was life for you as a young person growing up, and what kind of experience shaped, who you are today?
Yeah. Oh man. Anton, first of all, thank you so much, brother. Thank you for having me here. Thanks for bringing me in this space. It's funny because people in my adult life, in my professional adult life, know me as Emmanuel Paul Sterling and EPS, Mr. Sterling. That's what people know me as. But man, I grew up in Louisiana, small town north of New Orleans, as Sam. When people hear there are people who have engaged and been around me and family, and they hear my family all calling me Sam, it is one of those moments that make me reflect upon where I've come from and where I've been. And honestly, Sam was a name given to me by one of my aunts. And honestly, I rocked with it for forever. There are, again, like I say, when you go home, when I'm in Louisiana, people still call me Sam. And when I think about who Sam is or who is little Emmanuel, I think about family, the foundation. Like that's what it was for me, man. I learned, I didn't know that. I knew I didn't have a lot, but I didn't know how little I had until I started to see the world. I grew up with my mom and 3 siblings, my older brother and sister, and my younger sister, all in government housing in the small town of Vashon, Louisiana.
Oh man, thanks for sharing that. And they say you always learn something new about people, and we go. So that's, as you're kind of saying that, one big smile on my face, one for you, just that opening that up to our audience here. But also it just reminds you, when you're around family, it can kind of take you places that, you just childhood, whatever you want to say. So you're kind of saying hey, family calls me Sam, but just with a smile on my face there. So
Yeah.
I think, we started our connection professionally just in this AmeriCorps world. And I know that we all have our different whys and the things that have driven us to AmeriCorps. So I'm going to kind of pause there for a minute. So you might how did you find out about AmeriCorps? And secondly, what motivated you to serve as an AmeriCorps member for the time that you were with AmeriCorps and under that umbrella?
Yeah, it's wow. I spent one summer while in college working for a Boys and Girls Club of America camp out in California. So I had that moment, really enjoyed it, connected with a lot of kids. And honestly, when I got back to finish my senior year of college, a friend was like, man, you keep talking about this experience you had working with these kids. You should look into what was City Year and what is City Year. And honestly, I didn't know anything about City Year. I didn't know anything about AmeriCorps. All I knew is that I wanted to have a job coming out of college, and
Mhm.
and I applied to City Year. I knew I wanted to end up in a city that was that matched my personality. If people know me, they would say I have a big personality. So,
To the
you know,
least.
you know, a little big personality. And honestly, it was me applying to City Year, New Orleans, New York City, and Los Angeles, and being afforded the opportunity to serve in City Year in New York. Man, I talk about it often, but it changed my life. I didn't know there was a dropout crisis, even though I grew up with people who had not finished high school. I didn't know that there was food deserts.
Mm.
Like this, like what City Year did is it exposed me to what was the reality that I lived. Like I lived that reality and did not know, or at least I didn't have the language for it. And I spent 11 years in City Year. I spent 11 years. When I think about what it meant to spend many of my formative years with this organization, it was year one. I'm in a school in the South Bronx where towards the end of my service year, a young man asked, "Are you going to be here next year, Mr. E?"
Mm.
And that question fell like spare on my lap, like with a heaviness. Like I had built relationships. I'm a relationship builder. I'm a relationship builder. I went into the South Bronx community and built relationships with teachers, with students, with community members. Like, and here is this student asking, was I coming back? And honestly, the idea of not coming back made me think about who would stand on my shoulder, who would
Mm.
be the individuals who would come behind me. And little did I know, it was the introduction to what is the world, what is the work I do of building people-centered hiring and recruitment processes to move people in spaces so that there is representation of 20-year-old Emmanuels in rooms and at tables, like, and making sure that, whether it is a funder, a kid, or just someone on the ground doing organizing work, that they feel that they are representing something bigger than themselves.
Yeah, man. It's so much that you sort of stated there. And I think what's really resonating with me is just that exposure that can come with the AmeriCorps experience. And I can in so many ways mirror that from my experience in AmeriCorps. But also, I also think it's dope. It's kind of a mirror of the reality that you grew up in. You may not can't name it, but you being in the center of that through your service or AmeriCorps can be a very unique experience. So like how you shared that in a lot of ways kind of put me back in those thoughts as I kind of went through that exposure moment of that experience. But you talked a little bit, Emmanuel, about just your connection with, the students, the colleagues, the community. And I know in my time working with you as a colleague, what I really enjoyed is just like your unapologetic nature about who you are as a Black man and as a leader. And I want to ask you, like, how did you see your identity influencing, just your work and the connection that you mentioned that you made during your 11-year stint there with City Year? I know it's a part of who you are, as you mentioned, that personality you bring to space. So, I would love to hear, like, how does your identity help drive you in your work during your time there with the AmeriCorps and City Year?
Yeah. Before I left, I talked about family. Like, man, like while I grew up with my mom and siblings and without a father in the home, I had these examples around me that were pouring into me that felt like they were they were investing in me in a way that I saw important to then stand up and invest in others, but also like it made me want to represent in a way that I didn't think about originally. And I'm trying to in this effort to like in the attempt to like connect the stories for 4 years after I left my very black town where my pastor was black and my friends were black, and I then went to college where I had a new reality. Like I
Mhm.
went to a predominantly white institution, and honestly, it was in that space where I was introduced to other young black men and young black women who almost like empowered me to stand up, like encourage me being unapologetically myself. Like
Mhm.
that was where and it was in a world that wasn't where the individuals around me didn't look like me. You know, it's easy to be yourself when you are among like-minded people, when you are with family, or when you are with people who look like you,
Mhm.
and around people who look like you. And then it was this moment where I spent 4 years where the people didn't look like me, and I was constantly asking myself, who am I? Who do I want to be? Where am I going? So this reflection that I was doing while in undergrad was the birth of the person you ultimately met. It was
Mm.
this person who felt comfortable and confident in being just black, being gay, being someone who was an advocate for others who looked like him and folks who often didn't have the voice that I had worked so hard to have.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. That's so dope to as you kind of unpack that and talked about the experience and the people who kind of helped shape that. And the time that we interacted, I got to see the powerhouse that often came to spaces and made sure that what needed to be said was said, what needed to be held accountable was held accountable. And I always respected that about you. So I'm gonna just like jump into you talked a little bit about just your experience, particularly when we talked about equitable hiring and culture in today's time in the climate, we are seeing so many things that's kind of challenging the work that so many of us have done for years to ensure that we can move towards a more equitable space, particularly when we talk about hiring and culture. My question here is like, you built a career around it, like just this idea of hiring and making sure that people and culture is front and center. Like, how can you connect that back to your AmeriCorps experience? Like, are there particular threads there that you would say that drive you and have driven you towards this career pathway, this idea of just creating equitable spaces for us and as people?
You know, like there's these spaces that I've existed in. I often talk about existing in do good work. And oftentimes when you are doing good, the people who are impacted the most are people who look like me. So ultimately had to build systems that brought more people like me in. So there were
Mm.
times when I was looking around and looking up, even when again going back to my college experience, there were times when I'm like, what are we doing to get more black students at this institution? And what are we doing to get more marginalized voices at this table, knowing that we are supporting and growing and investing in communities of marginalized people. And it was that information, man, that really made me start to want to hold on to these ideas a little closer. And really, it was coupled with the relationships I've built. You know,
Mhm.
and I mentioned that like there were times where I sat in rooms at organizations that I worked, and while I knew the stories that we were talking about were black and brown people, there were none of them in the room. Like the people who are writing the checks, the people who were making the decisions were not in the room. And I'm like, what are we doing or what am I doing to make sure that those voices are elevated? And I knew that the work felt harder and heavier in doing it alone. And so for that reason, I was always thinking around how I was intentionally and honestly bringing people into organizations that I don't want to say they didn't value diversity, equity, and inclusion, but the belonging definitely was not there. Again,
I hear you.
like it's going back to, like when you didn't have the language, like when you talk like the work that I do now, I'm like, I was moving people this way for before it was called DEI. Like I was, like I needed to visit the BSUs on campus and the fraternities and sororities on campuses when recruiting students before it was a thing for people to do. It was a quota of teams that I led before it was a quota of organizations. And I thought it was important, and I really found value in it. The stories that I was able to hear and the stories I was able to tell made people genuinely interested in the roles that I was trying to put people in.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, and we kind of laughed about it, but I can agree with you. I was the same, connecting with fraternities, sororities, and visiting HBCUs as a part of the work before there was a title to it. So it's just the makeup of what I knew was important, that there was a representation that, like you kind of mentioned, is so important we have in these spaces. You talk a little bit about just this idea of mentorship in some small ways, and like the efforts that you make to ensure that you're kind of leaving things better for those who kind of follow you. Can you talk a little bit about just like how intentional you are about that? I've learned over the course of this kind of podcast journey that it's something that us as Black men are so intentional about and deliberate about. And I know we all do it in our own different ways. So like, I would love to hear, like, are there any assertive effort that you do and you've done along your journey to make sure like you're paving a way for other young people, or particularly young Black men who are maybe starting their career journey or looking for a little bit more mentorship and support?
Yeah, and I think part of it was I have a nephew who is 10 years younger than me. And so before I knew what it meant to be a mentor, I knew what it meant to have someone look up to me. I knew what it meant to have someone that I was going to pour into. So people talk about the investment that I have in people, how intentional I am about checking in and following up. That started so long ago with my oldest nephew. And honestly, it comes in town from this place of I want more often than not to give Black men, I want to create spaces that didn't exist for me, but also people don't see as spaces we would occupy. Like I have hosted, like, from the comforts of my home, like I brought, Black men into my home to say, let's have this conversation about how we are feeling post another police shooting. I have reached out to that friend after not getting a job and felt ostracized because of who he was and what he looked like. I reached out and been like, let's talk about it. Like really creating spaces for them to be heard, to be seen, and for them to actually feel. Like it is important, like this idea of feeling as it pertains to Black men. Like I really believe in that importance of connecting in that way. And it has been ways that have allowed me to stay connected to friends from high school, friends from college, fellow AmeriCorps members. Like it is those moments that I look back and be like, wow, that person felt comfortable calling me and sharing this very vulnerable thing because I have been intentional in my efforts to have them feel seen and heard in whatever they might have been going through.
No, man, that's so just empowering, man. Just the intentionality particularly when you talk about just like feeling, man, like I think so often for whatever reasons, we don't create spaces for us as Black men to express those feelings. And like for you to just have that intentionality, man, I kind of felt that to the core a little bit, like just what that feels like and what that looks like, just to kind of have that trust space to share
And,
that vulnerability, man.
and you know what? And it has been the foundation of the work that I've done. So when I'm talking about creating equitable hiring spaces and systems, it is often saying like, I want people who are coming in to interview, people who are coming in to consider an opportunity that the organization that I'm working for has. I want them to feel seen. I want them to feel as if they belong. So that practice that I have is actually personal and professional. It is why when I am doing this work, it means that much more to me. I often carry it with great pride because I do believe that it is both personal and professional when I'm doing it.
Yeah, there's an authenticity to it. And that's why I rock with you, because I mean, the kids is very, this is a lifestyle. You're not front here.
I'm
Um,
not new to this. I'm true to this.
like I think we were talking offline, man, like it's such a polarizing time. And one thing that I've been promising myself is to remain just more mindful of like both my personal vision and continue to just like dream of the way like I want to see both my life and just the work that I do. So I want to ask you, like, when you think about the future, particularly of around service and equity and hiring, like what do you hope to see? If you think about like your vision as we're kind of moving through this polarizing time, I think it's important for us to kind of keep that vision and idealism. So I want to give you a minute to see like what do you see when you think about like this work around service and equity and hiring?
I love this question. I'm a huge James Baldwin fan. I I'm always like, if I'm seeking clarity, I'm more often than not going to Brother Jimmy for something, for some words, for some knowledge, for something he's written. And one of the things he said, there's this quote by him that I love. It goes up a little bit like this: like, we can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression
Mm.
and denial of my humanity and right to exist. And that is how I have been showing up in spaces around all of the wildness that is happening in the world. Like, because I want to be intentional. I want to listen. I want to be an advocate of just lifting voices, and knowing that I won't always agree with everyone, knowing that oftentimes the work that I'm talking about doing, the systems that I'm talking about busting up and breaking down, it comes from a place of where people disagree with me. And I will enter that space and say, great, I understand that. But you have to make sure that your disagreement isn't rooted in my oppression. And so when I think about the future and I think about the world, I'm hoping that there are more people willing to stand up and say something that is uncomfortable. I hope that we can listen more beautifully. And I think that like we have to reimagine what is possible. I've been holding just a lot good people close to me recently who are really struggling to understand or see any light in what feels like total darkness,
Yeah.
and who really do feel like there are people who do not want them to exist. And I think a large part of that is when I hear people talking about this, or when I hear people acknowledging that, that feels so heavy that it makes me want to just, again, create spaces, I often talk about like, I want to remove barriers and build bridges. I want to remove barriers and build bridges. And that's how I think we need to exist moving forward, man, because there's a lot of wildness happening at this moment where people do not feel seen, they do not feel heard, and they actually feel like people do not want them to exist.
Yeah, man. And I think earlier you mentioned just this idea that we all are standing on the shoulders of giants. And there's so many people who have paved the way and sacrificed so much for us to be at this point. So we owe it to ourselves and to them to like, keep pushing, keep fighting, keep dreaming, man. So I just love how you kind of rounded that about and both kind of also brought in a little bit of the brother James Baldwin there, man. You can't go wrong when you got a little Baldwin in your reading, man. So
Right. I just had this conversation with a friend who likes to say, I would have marched with King. I think they miss that everyone was not marching with King. We need some people to bail some people out. When you go to jail, we need some people like we need some people cooking the food for the secret meetings that are happening. We actually need some people like out here doing this work that is, that isn't being on the front line and risking it all. And I think it sounds good to say I would have marched with King, not recognizing the importance of other roles that were played during that time. And so when you say that, you can say there are some shoulders, there are a lot of different shoulders you can stand on.
yeah, we all have to, play our role and play our part, man. But I think with that, a good segue into one of my favorite parts of the podcast, to be honest with you, is just a chance to shine a light on a service titan in your life, someone who's made a big or small impact on you, whether that's publicly or personally. I know in all of our lives, there have been people just kind of push us a little bit forward or see things in us that we don't see in ourselves. So I just want to give you a moment to highlight a service titan in your life. Why are they important and like, why did they shine a light on you?
The first person that comes to mind is like, man, my mom, who I got this level of unconditional love from that was tough love. That was patient parenting wasn't a thing. That wasn't a thing. It wasn't how I was raised. And I had to learn that she was a gift that would keep on giving, that continues to give. And honestly, I think about her because I think about my community. I'm going to make this, bring this all the way back. Man, I grew up in a neighborhood that who has the rice, who has the beans, who has the chicken, and we gonna all eat.
Mhm.
And it's funny because my mom was this like cooked all, like people be like, what Big E cooked? Like what your mama cook? Like I still hear these moments of people asking, what your mom cook? Can I come over there and get a plate? And I think about what it meant to serve your community before I understood what serving your community meant. We heard it takes a village. Like that was that piece. It takes a village. And to that point, there was a lot of religious laymen who were there as father figures, as guides, as prayer warriors that also played this role that supported. It was them coupled with my mom that allowed me to be who I am. I'm a journaler. So like when I'm writing, I'm often thinking about and have reflected many of times on how I became the version of this person I am today and am proud of. I would say my mom with the community being the foundation for the service titans in my life.
Oh man, that's so dope. And I like how you tied it to something that we all can identify. Mom got that plate for you and making sure everybody taken care of, man. So
Making sure everyone's taken care of. It is one of the things that I did a couple of years ago that I made me feel good is I sent these letters, handwritten notes to all these people back home. Whether if you had driven me to church, if you had helped me apply to a scholarship for college, like I wrote these letters, and all these people were just like, wow, to be recognized. And some of them were the parents of friends. Some of them were just community members. But I wanted them to realize that I am a product of them and their good deeds, however small or large.
man, that's such a best practice, and many of us don't even utilize the letter in the way that I know we once did. So that's cool, man. I want to, as we start to round out the podcast, I definitely want to make sure that I give you an opportunity to highlight anything that you would like to share with our listeners, like perhaps your social media handle, any projects you're currently working on, or things that you just think people might be interested in. I definitely want to give you the space to just like highlight what you're working on.
I use Instagram handle more often than not at EPS is for style. That's EPISFORSTYLE. And in that space, I'm often, lifting people up, lifting organizations up, really supporting friends in their endeavors. You can find me on Emmanuel Paul Sterling on LinkedIn, which is where I'm often talking about what it means to create just processes and systems so that people feel seen and not oppressed. And lastly, I would say, if you are listening and if you've gotten to this point of this episode, I'm not even going to ask that you write a handwritten note. I'm gonna keep it current. Send a text message to somebody who you have not seen or talked to in a while, who have made, again, a small difference in your life. Just send them a text message saying thank you, because it is important for us to feel connected during these times. Yeah, it's important for us to feel connected.
Oh man, I don't think it could be any better homework to just like take a moment and appreciate people in our lives in this world where everything is moving so fast, man. So I want to say, Emmanuel, or Mr. Sterling, as I like to call you, man, like truly thank you for taking time to join the podcast, for sharing your insights and experiences. Listeners, be sure to connect with Emmanuel on the platforms he highlighted. And with that, until next time, keep the conversation flowing, keep service front and center, and continue shining bright in your communities. This is Service Titans. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for joining us as we explored the inspiring journeys of Black men in AmeriCorps. Keep the conversation going by connecting with us on social media. Until next time, stay committed, stay courageous, and keep striving to make a difference. This is Service Titans, where every story told is a testament to the power of service. Thank you for listening.